Hello, welcome to Kill Pill Podcast. I'm your host, Ivy Wilson. This is the first episode, and today we're speaking with guest Roxanne Stewart Johnson, a psychiatric refugee whose documentary speaks of her fleeing from Jamaica and the psychiatric trap to Canada, where she pursued legal protection.
Ivy, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you very well. Thank you.
Okay, great. Awesome. Sorry about being a little late.
That's okay. It's so good to finally meet you.
Yes, you too. I'm glad we can do this. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's so cool. And welcome to the first episode of Kill Pill Podcast.
Kill Pill. I love it. Kill Pill. Yes.
Your documentary, A Psychiatric Refugee, story of getting refugee protection in Canada, highlights the story of yourself as a young mother overcoming the dangers of psychiatric system in Jamaica and your journey finding refuge and legal protection in Canada. The documentary was an inspiration and an eye-opening true story. It let me know I wasn't alone and someone else out there was able to do what I dreamed people could do in a situation so similar to my own, if they were able to rise above it and find a way. This type of message and historical information is so valuable, potentially life-saving. After you freed yourself and your children from Jamaica's psychiatric trap, one like so many others around the world, can you speak on the historically relevant changes you made by winning your case in Canadian court system?
Sure. Well, for one thing, it was a very unique case in itself. I was getting a lot of no's. If you watch the documentary, you'd see that all these lawyers were telling me, this is ridiculous. You're going to lose, all kinds of stuff like that. And unfortunately, I have lost contact with the two lawyers who worked with me. There were three lawyers that worked on my case. Susan Woolner unfortunately passed away from cancer. Um, uh, and Martin Gincherman and what's the name of the Jeffrey Goldman didn't like the documentary I made.
Oh, really?
So they cut off ties with me having seen that documentary. So
Wow.
I guess they were mad. The fact is that I had to do the majority of the work myself, which I did, and they didn't really know much about psychiatric rights in Canada, how different things are in Jamaica. I was the one who had to get the UN reports, the news articles from Jamaica. I was the one who had to do, transcribing phone calls and recordings, and everything was pretty much on me. At the end of the day, Jeffrey Goldman took my submissions because I thought I was going to be doing this by myself. So, you know how lawyers make submissions and say, this is why. Well, he just basically copy pasted my submissions, made them his submissions
Mm-hmm.
and stuff. So, and also, I did complain in the documentary that I was really mistreated by them a lot. There was definitely a power dynamic that, like you're some nobody from Jamaica, you're a graphic artist, you know nothing about law, you know nothing about refugee law or human rights, and you're coming to tell me how to win this case. So there was a lot of don't talk, be quiet, and
Oh,
this
yeah.
is your homework, that kind of stuff. And
Oh, I know those phrases very well.
yeah. So, like me calling out the behavior obviously didn't sit well with them. And the fact that, yeah, I was the one who did the brunt of the work. I couldn't sit down and wait for them, like, you know. So, unfortunately, because of that, I don't know if there are any other psychiatric refugees that they have used my case to help.
Mm.
because usually your case sets a precedent. And if somebody is in a similar situation, they can look at the decision of the board for previous cases. My case should now be case law, right? But
Yeah.
unfortunately, because Susan Wilner passed on, and both Marty and Jeff were mad about the documentary I made that didn't show them in the best light, but that was what happened.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, I don't know what, and but I know that at least now that it is a decision, it's officially an immigration and refugee board uh, decision that's been made by a judge. At least I know anybody facing a similar situation. Because I mean, I even found out recently that, a mother whose son was in the psychiatric ward was beaten to I don't know what, because they get physically the staff, the medical staff in Jamaica get physically violent. It's not even just taking away your rights or forced drugging. It's like if you take one of them off, they will hit you with their steel toe boot, you
Oh my
know,
God.
and stuff like that. I know my friend, I won't mention his name because he didn't want his name mentioned, but it is in the documentary that he gave me his experience, and he was tied up and beaten and all kinds of stuff, beaten with piece of wood and stuff like that. So
I
I
did
guess,
that footage.
huh?
I did see some of that footage from the documentary of aerial view of people getting beaten by the staff.
Oh yes, yes. Actually, those pieces of footage I got from the American system. So, I got from American, but they did, I think, I got that footage because there was a news some journalists who did a deep dive into how people are being treated in psychiatric institutions behind the scenes, and beatings are going on and stuff like that. So it's not just Jamaica, it's even in a wealthy country like the United States that things like that are happening.
Oh yeah.
um yeah, but unfortunately I just don't know. Like, I remember going to Francisco Martinez, who was the head of the FCJ Refugee Center. He was a human rights lawyer, knew about refugee law and everything. And he told me, Roxanne, you're the first person I've seen that come, because he said that he saw multiple Jamaicans come over to Canada for the exact same situation.
Wow.
And he said that, Roxanne, you're the first person I've seen that has gotten through. Right. So I do wonder, like, I hope that if any more refugees, either from the United States, and he told me, Roxanne, you're the first person I've seen that come, because he said that he saw multiple Jamaicans come over to Canada for the exact same situation.
Wow.
And he said that, Roxanne, you're the first person I've seen that has gotten through. Right. So I do wonder, like, I hope that if any more refugees, either from the United States, anywhere else where it's just crazy, the human rights abuses they do to the mentally ill, I would hope that they could use the judge's decision from my case. But unfortunately, I haven't been able to, hear any statistics or any, and stuff. And even trying to find somebody who is a psychiatric refugee from a country. I mean, I even was trying to convince my friend who helped me, I
Yeah.
was like, so and so, I got through. So if you want to come over, I will totally help you with your case. And
Yeah.
he couldn't manage it. Well, some people, it's like, I was fed up with Jamaica from before. He isn't fed up enough, I guess. And
It's a big move.
yeah, yeah,
A huge adjustment, but I understand why you ran.
Yeah. Yeah. But Mad in America actually did an article. It was written by Jim Gottstein. I don't know if you know who he is, but he's a lawyer and he is also a psychiatric survivor. And he's done a lot to, in terms of exposing pharmaceutical companies, the dangers of antipsychotics. He's done a lot, Jim Gottstein, and he, was very like amazed at my case, and so he wrote an article in Mad in America about it. And my little documentary got featured in a little film festival here in Toronto, but that's about
Great.
it.
Yeah, I do remember seeing your article on MIA. I am connected with them.
Okay,
I
okay.
wrote to them before about my first experience as an inpatient, and it was published on the stories portion.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it might have been that article that drew me to your documentary, or I think though I think actually I was searching and found it just by searching relevant topics.
Okay, okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but that's so important. I wish there was a way to get that information, and it should be like you hand it to somebody as soon as they get there, if
Yeah,
they
I
need.
know. Like hair, someone else just came in there exactly like you, blah
Yeah,
blah 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 blah. I think though the difference that what really made a difference though is that I knew that nobody's going to just believe you just like that, Roxanne. You have to record everything. So, luckily enough, when I was being threatened by the doctor, by the psychiatrist, just it clipped in my head, record with your phone. So, I had my phone under the table in my hand and just recorded everything. So, and then after that happened with the doctor, I put apps on my phone to record all my phone calls. I would record any other doctors that I interacted with. I recorded everything. So, and that's a problem. I think a lot of people, even if they do come over, and it's the same situation, um, because you are someone with a psychiatric, um, a psychiatric
stigma.
diagnosis,
Yeah.
right? Your credibility is going to be shot,
Oh
right?
yeah.
Because in refugee law, your credibility is like what gets you through. And if you don't have, you know, like, oh, okay, this person could be mental. How do we know they're not making things up? Blah blah blah. So that made the huge difference that I had every WhatsApp conversation, I had every email, I had every text message, I had every recorded phone call, I had every recording that I put under the table. I was like, yes, while I'm record. So I had all this evidence that nobody needed to the burden of proof is really on you, and I was able to meet my burden because they didn't have to go by what I said. They could look and see what happened in the recordings. So yeah.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And that's I wish I did that. you know?
I know it's hard, especially if you're in hospital and they take away your phone.
Oh yeah.
How are you going to do that?
Absolutely. Yeah. So and next question would be, I imagine during your escape, the legal pursuit in Canada and afterwards, that stress alone in that situation could make a person feel or even look to others crazy.
Mhm.
How much did the pressure and the stress affect your daily life and surroundings? Did you feel endangered in Canada the way you did in Jamaica?
I didn't feel as endangered in Canada, but I'll tell you that at first, when I came over and I kind of made community with a Jamaican Seventh-day Adventist church, only to see that people in the Jamaican community had the same kind of feelings or thoughts towards people with mental illness that's in my own country. So I realized I need to break ties with these people because I'm
Mm,
feeling threatened. I'm feeling afraid. Another thing I had to learn, and it's a good thing that I have good acting skills, but you have to mask. You have to mask. Like the entire time that I was dealing with Martin and Jeff, I couldn't really show all my full feelings because if I did, I knew they would just say, see, she's crazy, blah, blah, blah. Even though I had
yep.
gone through all this trauma, I mean, I was pregnant. They were trying to kill my child. My mother wanted me to have an abortion, all this betrayal, this is that. My dad, unfortunately used to sexually harass me. There's that
Mm,
trauma, all of that. And basically, I had to just look like I was chilling. I just had
yeah.
to look like everything, even when Jeffrey Goldman would be yelling at me and snapping at me, I had just had to act like it was all okay. You can't cry, you can't yell, you certainly can't get angry, until I was able to find a safe space. I really had to mask a lot. It's not comfortable, but it's life and death. If you ever think about I don't know, like someone escaping the Holocaust and having to pretend that they're not a Jew or something like that. Similar things, or somebody in the trans community having to mask or pass for dear life. It's the same thing. You have to go according to sanism. You have to look like, your typical stereotype. Oh, well, oh, that's too bad. Oh, did you watch Friends last night? You just have to be casual. You have to pretend like
Yeah.
nothing's wrong. And I can tell you that I'm glad that I found friends in the psychiatric community and friends that are not necessarily part of the psychiatric survivor community, but the people who have bipolar disorder, whatever, where
Yeah.
I can cry, I can be upset, I can, whatever. And those are the safe spaces. But I still do have to be careful. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh gosh, I can totally relate um to all of that um in my own experiences, and uh it's um it's so powerful that you were able to keep pushing and hold on until finally you found that safe space and you were secure.
Mhm. Oh, yeah, it's life and death. It's life and death. When you realize that it's really life and death, you really have no choice but to push all those feelings down with the hope that eventually you will find a safe space in which all the trauma and all the emotion can come out in a safe way.
Yeah. Would you consider yourself an activist currently speaking on iatrogenic trauma in the psychiatric system in your current projects and endeavors?
I was when I just came over, actually I enrolled in Toronto Metropolitan University in their journalism, master in journalism course, and basically that's all I covered. For my last journalism assignment to even graduate, it was a long form investigative feature on the dangers of antipsychotics.
Mm,
And I was hoping, and I met with, everybody in the psych community. So Jim Gottstein, Eric
uh,
Fabris, people who are, Tina Minkowitz, just different people in the,
yeah,
Tina Minkowitz, yeah. Inner
yeah.
Compass Initiative. Basically, I met all of those people because of the long form investigative feature that I did. But it's kind of gone along the wayside. I would say that I'm more interested right now in what causes the trauma that leads to mental health issues. So right now I'm very, very, very involved in advocacy against child sexual abuse. You know,
Mhm.
I'm a survivor myself, and I do believe that the trauma from that caused my psychosis and my confusion for several years, not understanding how that trauma, affected my brain that was still developing as a young child, you know what I mean? So,
Yeah.
I'm still a part of the psychiatric survivor community. I'm part of their listserv and emails, but I haven't been, and of course, my documentary, I made it to expose everything and whatnot, but I haven't really been focused on that so much
Mhm.
as I'm focused on childhood trauma and how it leads to mental health issues in adulthood.
Excellent. Okay. Very interesting. So then you're probably familiar with the ACEs acronym.
ACEs, yes, adverse childhood experience study, of course.
It's so interesting because I painted something while I was temporarily separated from my children. And it was me holding on to them with the storm coming. And I added text to it. And in the light between the clouds was the letters ACES. And then an article came up from MIA with ACEs. And I learned what the acronym meant. I was like, wow,
Yes.
that's such synchronicity.
Wow. That's incredible. So you didn't even know what ACEs was before, but
Yeah,
it was
no,
in your painting. That's
yeah.
amazing.
Yeah, there was an artist that I saw at the MoMA, and she was a German activist, journalist, and artist, and she added text to her work. So I was inspired there, and I put a few lines, and it just came out in the painting.
Yeah.
So the next question I have is, how has life changed for you after psychiatric treatment?
So life has changed for me a lot. Well, it's wonderful living in Canada and having still experienced really bad psychosis. I mean, I had my last hospitalization in just November of last year, and so it made me come to the realization that I do need help from antipsychotics, but I have an amazing psychiatrist, Christopher Kitamura, who believes in me. He's like, Roxanne, you've been able to achieve amazing things, and he's advocated for me a lot. And it's not like in Canada every psychiatrist is like that, but
Hmm.
definitely because Ontario um and definitely Toronto is very human rights centered. I
Mm,
found that the treatment that I've got in hospital was like, especially with the last one that was in November, everybody was kind, everybody was, respectful. There was no abuse, emotional abuse, physical abuse, abuse of power, and it's not everywhere, but it's nice to be that a person that, listen, I have a disability, but I'm not going to be in harm's way simply for being a vulnerable person like you are in Jamaica. In Jamaica, boy, it's it's a wild, wild west there. And if you fall into any vulnerable group, if you're gay, if you're trans, if you have a mental illness, if you have a physical disability, if you're elderly, if you're a girl, if you're a child, like everything is there. Because we just have a lot of issues, deep issues that are not quick fixes to solve.
yeah. Yeah, wow. It's so funny that you said Wild Wild West. There was a place that I was living in Florida, and when I saw a lawyer for an issue I was having there, not related to mental health, but uh, sexual harassment in the workplace, um,
Mm-hmm,
the lawyer that I contacted described that area as the Wild Wild West. And it really
mm-hmm.
is like that in pockets of the US. more so than others, similar to how you described.
Absolutely. I can totally see that with the US and how certain areas are, certain communities and stuff. It's just you know, there's some places it's like, all right, in Jamaica, I would say when it comes to human rights, it's pretty much hopeless unless you are related to somebody who's important in politics. That's the only way that you can, or you're related to some rich, because Jamaica has its elite class, and then it has
Mm,
the rest of Jamaica, which about 80% of the population is below the poverty line, and then you have the elites who, that's the only way you can get any access to justice, but it's pretty much hopeless if you're a nobody. But here, it's like it doesn't matter if you're a nobody. There's due process and legislation. And true, you do have to make noise about it because, like, it's not like, you can just go, this happened to me, and everybody will just help you. Right.
I
I
hear.
find,
Yeah.
yeah, I find that you really have to do a lot of advocacy, but hey, at least it works. If you
Yeah.
if you make noise and you do your advocacy, it works. But in Jamaica, there's no hope.
Mm. How long did it take for from the time that you got to Canada to fulfill that legal process and succeed?
Sure, it took 2 years. So I
To
arrived in 2017, March 2017. I officially got my documentation as a refugee claimant in May of 2017. Had like 5 different hearing dates in which we all always met. The first hearing date we met, but there was a clash, so the judge could only spare a little time. But pretty much I had 4 more hearing dates, and they were long,
mm,
long expositions, being questioned by the minister's counsel, being questioned by by my lawyer, being questioned by the judge. So there were those 5. That ended in December of 2018. Finally, the last hearing, and then it took like 6 months before the judge gave her written decision. So she gave her decision in May of 2019. So it literally took like two years since I got my refugee claimant status.
okay. Gotcha. Wow.
Mhm.
Thank you for that. And
Sure.
would you agree that minimalizing or removing chemical treatments and forced treatments and instead effectively treating the physical and environmental imbalances first would be a more sound approach? Like so say um, the initial scare of either mental illness, emotional illness, psychosis.
Yeah, I think definitely. All right. So, all right. When someone is in acute distress, so they're experiencing psychosis and it's acute. Yes, okay, I can see where the medication comes in, but that's a temporary band aid. What really has to be looked at is how did this person get that way? They didn't just get that way because, oh, genetics or a chemical imbalance. It's trauma that gets people that way. Sometimes it's generational trauma that gets people that way. It's and I very much know that childhood sexual abuse, wow, does it do a number to the brain in terms of trauma, right? There's emotional abuse, there's physical abuse, but once there's childhood sexual abuse in there, wow, you've got a lot of trauma there. And if it's never addressed, all you're going to be doing is putting band-aids on symptoms, right?
Yeah.
Band-aids on symptoms. And I know there's a guy, his name is Chris Blackwell. He used to go by the he has a YouTube channel. He's called Bipolar Waking Up. Not
Yeah, I'm
that I
familiar.
not that I disagree with what he's saying, right? But
Mhm.
these things that are manifestations of trauma, and I'm glad that he is doing his practice wherever in Venezuela or where, because he had to get out of the United States, right? Because the United States wants to psychiatrize everyone
Yeah.
instead of looking at the fact that trauma has led to this, and so I agree with him to a point. I don't know his methodology. Sometimes his methodology is like, when you hear these voices or whatever, or these demons, talk to them, see what happens and stuff like that. Not that it's not necessarily true, but yeah, I think a combination of, okay, uh the acute symptoms, you're hearing frightening things, seeing frightening things. Yes, of course, a person can't live like that. I mean, I know from myself, experiencing psychosis at an extended amount of time is absolutely terrifying. I thought I was going to die of a heart attack last November.
Oh my
You know what I
God.
mean? Like, it's just boom, boom, more, the worst, the worst, the worst. So certainly I can appreciate the role of medication, but that's just not where it ends. You
Yeah.
know, I know for a fact that, growing up in Jamaica, where the threat of sexual violence is ever present, and knowing that it's ever present from your 10 years old, right? It was a traumatic country to live in. And it's not obviously just Jamaica, like anywhere where you have high crime, high poverty,
Yeah.
um other issues, war, civil conflict, all of those things, the brain can only take so much, you
Yeah.
know and so for I mean, I like to keep up to date with what's going on in the world. And I want to hear, even though it's traumatic to hear, but I want to know what is going on in these countries, Democratic Republic of the Congo, Nigeria, Afghanistan, where the women are going through their the Israeli Palestine conflict, everything going on.
Yeah.
The world is a really tough place. There's so much trauma. There are very few countries in which there are safe space. As a matter of fact, like, if you even look at a map of the human trafficking tier list, right?
Hmm.
It will show you the green countries where human rights and legislation against human trafficking um are somewhat, you know held up. And then everywhere else is red and dark red and burgundy and stuff like that. So you really only have a few places of safety in this world where you can even access, health care and other things. So I just know that these issues, these social determinants of health, they call it, and
Hmm.
whatnot, they play huge roles, you know? So yeah.
Yeah. Mm. Yeah. I remember Chris Blackwell when I first experienced altered state of consciousness, and it was actually around 2000, between 2012 to 2014 when that started. Um, and Yeah, it's interesting. Um, I appreciate what you said, where it's a temporary band-aid, the medications. But it seems that our psychiatric system wants to put you on drugs, keep you on drugs, add more drugs if you complain about side effects, and they do it ongoing unless you make noise and complain or know your rights. And a lot of times for me, when I was on those drugs, um, I wasn't mentally capable of speaking for myself or thinking for myself a lot of the time. And it took
Mhm.
a long time. And then people were afraid for me to want to change what was going on in
Right.
me.
Right,
so
right,
that
right.
was difficult. Um, let's see. So another question here, and we're almost done.
No
Thank
worries.
you so much. I'm sure you're aware that in the USA, the FDA refuses to hear from psychiatric survivors who provide lived experience as empirical data. So when they're deciding on marketability and legality of new psychiatric drugs, what are your thoughts on this? Where do you see things going for in terms of psychiatric treatment as it relates to the relationship of the FDA and the pharmaceutical corporations?
Well, it's a big fight. It's going to be a big fight because the thing is that the FDA and even the psychiatric system and the clinical medicine in general, they they don't want to spend time and money looking at the effects of the social determinants of health. They are looking at numbers, they're looking at statistics, and that's what it boils down to. They're looking at, well, when we put this person on quetiapine, we noticed that there was like a 78% drop in violent crime, or they just look at numbers like that. They don't look at the quality of life. They don't look at the my son over there. Like,
2 minutes.
what's going on? So they don't. I'm gonna have to. I can't talk to you right now. So yeah, so they don't look at your quality of life. They and it's just too expensive for them. At the end of the day, it's the dollar. We pay how many millions of dollars for these psych drugs to be studied and tested and finally put out on so you've got profit to deal with. You got the fact that people just want to look at numbers. Yes, okay, this person is no longer violent, but you've turned them into a mental vegetable.
Yeah.
But all they want to know is you know um they'll look at things like even mass shooters, and they'll say, well, because that person was bullied and traumatized and blah blah blah, if we had just put them on some kind of psych drug, we wouldn't have had this that the other. And so that's what it comes down to for them. It comes down to statistics and measurable results. And unfortunately, it's not trauma is not measurable, right? I mean, if like I went to an organization called the Gatehouse, which gives support for persons who have experienced childhood sexual abuse, right? But
Yeah.
there are not enough organizations like that, and there are not enough organizations like that giving data to show, hey, guess what? This person was diagnosed with this, and that. They came through our program. They went through trauma healing, trauma therapy, looking at all their adverse childhood experiences, right? And boom, guess
Good
what?
point.
They're living healthy lives, good quality lives. That kind of information is hard to come by because even the Gatehouse, like, it's a one organization in Toronto. I can't believe it. Toronto, Toronto's like one of the biggest cities in the world, biggest first world cities in the world. You got one organization offering support for childhood sexual abuse survivors.
That is such a good point because I remember when I first started learning about this, when I first got put on the medications and I realized they weren't helping, I needed to start tapering. That you know, yeah, if there's no data, it's because there aren't any organizations like that, or they're so unattainable, they're far away, they cost so much money. There's one in a million. So how are
Exactly.
we supposed to provide any alternative data if our system is only set to prove itself right?
Yep. And you know what? The ACEs study, it's a really great study. It has a lot of data on our incarcerated populations. A lot
Mm,
incarcerated populations, especially among the African diaspora, because I've been looking at that a lot, right? There's a high rate of what's called antisocial personality disorder, right? In incarcerated populations. That doesn't just come by itself. It comes from trauma. It comes from child abuse. It comes from, terrible parenting, no love in the home. These kids become violent because they're not able to emotionally regulate themselves. So, and the adverse childhood experience study is looked at by a lot of criminologists. So if they want statistics, they can see the fact that trauma is a huge factor in why we have violent crime and incarcerated populations, right? But again, it's like they're not putting the two and two together. They just know that, put some Wellbutrin on that person, they'll be, you know, uh, 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 yes, they're safe, but I don't know if you call that a human being anymore. That's just staring into space, drooling. What is that?
Yeah, and they're replacing the things that the child or the person, the adult needs, like, you know, healthy social interaction, community
Yes.
support, a purpose,
Yes.
everything healthy and necessary for a fulfilling life. It's so sad. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
it's
Yeah, it's frustrating, but a lot of people, when it comes to policy making, they don't want to sit down and do the long work. They just want numbers. What are your statistics? Okay, great, good. So that goes into policy making, the easy numbers, right? It's
yeah.
not looking at what criminologists have known for a long time, that adverse childhood experiences, it's like a domino effect leading people into the criminal justice system or the
Mm,
psychiatric system.
yeah. Yeah. So I guess final thoughts. Do you have any advice or warnings for me as I'm just starting this podcast, or any final thoughts before we wrap it up?
I guess definitely when it comes to psych rights, it's about looking at those deeper issues as well. It's like, if there's a child that's never known love, they've only known fear, anxiety, and severity, and so these are the big questions, because fact is psychosis is real, and and antipsychotics are not just snake oil. But the thing is that, we as we um as we advocate, I'd say that the side that's missing in psych rights advocacy. They'll say, okay, no more forced treatment, no more antipsychotics. Okay, but what can we do? Because the fact is that this is a messed up world, and it's causing people to lash out, this trauma and whatnot. So if we're saying that forced treatment needs to be gotten rid of, if we're saying that antipsychotics are just not the way and it's a band-aid, we got to look at the realities and say, how are we going to address these realities? How are we going to address the fact that childhood trauma is what is leading people to psychiatric issues and to end up in the criminal justice system? So, for law enforcement, for policymakers, for everybody in social services dealing with vulnerable people, if you simply say, get rid of forced drugging, get rid of the psychiatric system, they'll flip out. They'll say that there's no way we can work with these people without this. So we have to say, hey, this is where we need to approach it. Yes, there's the band-aid, okay, but we need to be going way deeper down to address the real issues as to why people are ending up either having their liberty taken away by the psychiatric system or having their liberty taken away by the criminal justice system, right? It's almost one and the same, really, the psych and criminal justice system. So I'd say that, like, it's not just about getting rid of these very terrible things that people die on. Like, people
Oh
die
yeah.
from antipsychotics. You can't just say, well, there's no other way. I know I'm going to shorten his life by about 30 years, but there's no other way. People are dying, right?
Yeah, literally, you shouldn't be legally able to do that, knowing that it does shorten people's lives and hurt and cause suicide. There has to be that temporarily, and then a plan. They
Yeah,
don't do a health plan in addition to those dangerous drugs. And
yeah,
I would love to see a study where, you take somebody on that pill and just and only do drugs, compared to you put them on the pill but you taper them off after a certain time, and you do provide a health plan and address those root issues and causes.
exactly. They need to evaluate these people coming in and ask them questions. Hey, what was your childhood like? Did you have two parents? Was one incarcerated? Was there drug use? Da 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 da. There are all these things they need to start evaluating people for. I look at the soul of people. These are not just, I met a psychiatrist out here. Boy, it's like to me, she belongs in Jamaica with the rest
Yeah.
of her cohort there in terms of how much she cares about people, right? Because
Man.
it looked like she just looking for, get, oh, it pays, here's another one, right? So, but for the people who care, and that's what we need, people who sincerely care about human beings and the soul and the deeper things that are underneath the surface. And that's what we really need, people who genuinely care.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, it's so good to meet you and hear
It's
from you.
great. I'm
A
so
real
sorry this took so long.
Oh, it's okay. Oh my gosh. And I'll never forget when I learned about you and I saw your documentary, and this is just such a special thing. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you so much. I'm so glad to be a part of getting the word out.
If you haven't seen it
Maybe I
already,
shouldn't have
you
gone
have to
straight into my
check out
master's after that camp. Maybe I
A
should have taken some
Psychiatric
time to get some
Refugee,
emotional support
my
for my mental
personal
health
story
and deferred
of
RISD.
fleeing from
But I
Jamaica
went right
and
in, and I
seeking
think that was the beginning
refugee
of the
protection in
complete nervous
Canada
breakdown that
by
I was going to
Roxanne
have by
Johnson.
about April of
Her
2005.
YouTube channel
To
is
kind of summarize, I remember I
RoxStew5,
wasn't sleeping.
and the links are
I
provided
literally
in the
watched the sun come
description.
up for quite a few
Thank
days
you,
back to back.
and please
Finally,
tune
I
in to the
experienced
next
complete
episode
psychosis.
of
I
Kill Pill
remember I was sitting on the
Podcast.
couch